Hey everybody, Price Tag here with Aqua Decor Background Review Part 3. This is my final video in the series, and I'm going to tell you how I finally was able to put the rocks in, and of course the last step is to move fish from one tank to another. And I will explain the process behind it all. So, last but not least, let's jump right in.
So a recap on the first two videos. In my first video, I unboxed all the different pieces and showed them off to you guys. And the extra rocks I had bought along with the background, just so I could show you what everything looked like up front. And then I put them in the tank and just kind of set them in place as a general idea of how it would look before doing anything else. In my second video is when I started siliconing the back of each individual piece and then setting them in place one by one inside the tank until the entire background was stuck on the back of the glass and I could move on from there. It was very challenging doing this for the first time, but I got through it and it ended up being not too bad. After that was done, I wanted to show you guys where the heater and the intake to the FX6 filter went behind the background and how I routed the output of the filter. And then of course adding the sand, the water, waiting for a day or so for the water to clear up, and continue our journey from here. So one of the first things that I did was set all the rocks in place of how I wanted them to go inside the tank, took a picture of it so I wouldn't forget how they were set up, and then go from there. So as I started putting these rocks into the tank, they actually took quite a while for them to gather up water inside the rock so they would sink up to the bottom. That was me looking back thinking, man, I was hoping this was going to fill up a lot quicker. But once they did fill up with water, they were okay to finagle with. And they were still pretty durable. I mean, even with putting all the different types of rocks in, the different shapes and sizes and everything, and trying to put them in place to where I wanted to, not once did I ever have a scratch or a dent or anything like that. So these rocks were definitely really well made. Another thing that I did too is I made sure to take the measurement of the length of the tank, and then I used that whenever I was setting the rocks in place off to the side. So that way, whenever I was setting everything in place, I kind of knew the general measurement idea of where everything was going to go, so whenever I got to the end, that it would be centered and everything was going to be correct. Am I being too picky? Yeah, you're right, I probably am. But hey, if I was going to spend the time and energy and effort to make this look great for myself and for you guys, I wanted to make sure that it was going to look as perfect as it could be for both me and for you guys. So I'm glad I took a picture before I started moving all the rocks, because you wouldn't believe how easy it was to forget, wait a minute, where did that rock go? And which way was it facing? When I would move them from the table into the tank and waiting for the water to fill up. So it was quite a long process. So with that all being said, you guys know the phrase, well, it looked good on paper. Well, that's the trouble I was having towards the end of this. You guys ever start a project where you're like, yep, this is going to work out perfectly, and then the longer you go into it, you're like, man, this does not look how I imagined it was going to look. So I tried and kept trying, and then I realized this isn't working at all. So I had to bring the big guns in, because I am not the greatest aquascaper. But do what you gotta do, right? If you need help, what better help can can I ask for than my wife? And she was a lifesaver. Because no matter how many times I tried to rearrange everything and make everything look good, I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. But with my wife's help, everything couldn't have looked better. And we made this thing look really, really well. And this thing was just one giant puzzle piece that took both of us to figure out. But can you guys tell the difference? I think the way that this was set up and how we made it work out gave the fish a lot more swimming room than my original setup. So I'm really glad we got this to work out. So what do you think?
Before I start adding fish into this aquarium, there's a few things I'd like to mention before I do so. And the first thing that I've done is, if you've watched the previous videos when I'm setting this tank up, that I've taken out other media from different tanks, like your pre-sponge filters and any other type of filtration, and I put it into this tank and squeezed it out to kind of help make this cycle, run a little bit quicker, and that's supposed to help with that. The second thing that I bought is there's this stuff called FX6 Turbo Start. It looks like this, and I just got it on Amazon. But what this is it rapidly cycles biological filters and corrects ammonia and nitrite imbalances. And that's just reading right from the bottle. I've seen other YouTubers use this if they want to add fish relatively quickly. And this is a 4-ounce bottle right here. And this 4-ounce bottle treats up to 200 gallons. But what's nice about this stuff, and this is reading right from the bottle too, that this can safely be used for up to 5 times the recommended dosage. So if I'm thinking about maybe 100 gallons, give or take, and this treats up to 200, I'm only going about twice as what this was recommended. So I'm doing pretty good. So I can add this whole bottle in and be good to go. It also recommends to use any type of Sealant prime or water conditioner while you're using this before adding fish. So that's what I'm using, is Sealant prime. And then whenever I move the fish from one tank into here, I'm going to obviously monitor the levels just to double check and make sure. And if there's anything that might arise, which I don't think there will be, but if just in case, then I have what's called FX6 7. I've been using this stuff for a while and it works terrific, and it's the one thing that I can trust for sure. This is also nitrifying bacteria to help remove the ammonia and nitrate until your tank is either completely cycled 100% with no drawbacks, or if you just happen to have a spike here and there. So that's a few things I wanted to mention before I start moving fish over. So let's get started.
Since I was planning on moving this tank to a different location to begin with, I figured I might as well just move everything out of the way to make everything easier on myself. I mean, fish catching is never as easy as it looks. So if I can make anything easier on myself, then I might as well do so. Now I know that this part and the previous part has nothing to do with the background, but I feel like the previous part from this has a lot of useful information for people who want to start up a new tank, and if they want to go big or go home, to have a nice big background to go with it. I feel like that was useful information to pass on. And as far as this part goes, I just think it's entertaining to see videos of people moving fish around from one tank to another, because you don't see that too often, and I thought I'd present that for you guys. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And that thing you see floating at the top there, that's just a thermometer with those amazing suction cups that they supply those with. Well, a job well done. All the fish are in the tank. And nothing went wrong. So can't complain too much, right? And the fish are just now starting to settle in, trying to get used to their surroundings. But I'll tell you what, it didn't take long. Because one of the coolest things to watch is this right here. To see these front toes that swim in a group, all in a row, and go in between all the rocks and out front. And they do this on a daily basis. And the coolest thing is, I never saw them do this in the 55. And ever since I got this set up, that's all they do now. These dolphins, they'll even do the same thing as well. And it's a really neat thing to see, and very relaxing and therapeutic in my opinion. And the yellow labs, they're fitting in just as well, enjoying their new home. And of course, I decided to give them a little food to help them get more comfortable to their new adjustment and new environment. But like I said, they were fitting in quite nicely, and I couldn't be happier with how everything turned out as a whole.
Thanks guys for coming and hanging out with me during this Aqua Decor series. If you made it through this whole video and through part 1 and 2, I really appreciate you watching and coming and checking out my whole process within making this background and everything put together with the fish and everything. So with all that being said, I'm going to give you my final thoughts and final review of the Aqua Decor background. And so I read through some of the comments from the first 2 videos, and I hope to see some comments on this video as well. And I took some information from what I learned and from my experience and wanted to share my final review with you guys. So first thing is the background is definitely a puzzle that you have to figure out. And that starts from getting it out of the box, taking it out, finding all the numbers that are on the back, putting it together, putting the silicone, gluing it to the back, and then putting all the rocks in with it, and then making it how to look exactly how you want it to. And me being picky, that was something that I was real precise about. This model here is the A series. The A and C series are best for your Lake Malawi and Tanganyika tanks. That way you have plenty of hiding spots and big cracks and crevices, and like the rocks in here, they have plenty of spaces to go and swim around into. The C models are the bigger models for like your big tanks, so I'm talking like you're probably 210s and plus. They also have different options like slim backgrounds, magnetic backgrounds, and different options as well. Whenever you guys do your ordering, if you're interested in buying one of these, is how they size everything with your rocks and your background is they take the tank dimensions, and they also need to know like how many rocks you have, and that's how they size up your background and rocks and set up all together. Another thing to keep in mind is these backgrounds do take up a lot of room, so if you're willing to sacrifice that swimming space and room space for your background, then that's totally up to you. And you gotta think, with this being a 125, you got the background, the rocks, you got the substrate, so that's all taking into effect. So I'm probably estimating about maybe 80, 100 gallons, give or take, of swim space for the fish to swim around in. So that's definitely something to consider when buying one of these backgrounds. And they also have slimmer backgrounds too, so if you were to get like this same size tank and you wouldn't get any rocks with it, you could just buy a slim background and just do whatever else you want with the rest of it. So that would give you more swimming space if you don't want to lose that amount. Now I feel like this next part is one of the main things that people will consider the most when buying one of these backgrounds, is of course the price. You gotta find the right price tag. Anyways, the price is pretty expensive, but I believe that you do get what you pay for. And if you have the money and if you have the time and effort to make it look of that, you know, that wow factor, in my personal opinion, I think it's worth it. This has been kind of a bucket list thing for me, to be able to have a larger size tank with larger fish. And if I was gonna do this, I was either gonna go big or go home. So I wanted to make sure that this was gonna be the best looking tank in this entire house. So I wanted to spend the money on it and make it look good and spend the time and effort. One thing that's nice that's on their website when you go to it is they have a price calculator to where you can plug in the tank size that you want and all the information you need for them to kind of give you an estimate of how much it's going to cost. So that's something that is really nice before you buy, that you can kind of get a general idea of how much it's going to cost, and it's very easy. They have great customer service. Everything is through email, but I've said this in my first video. They're very prompt, they're very professional. They answered all my questions thoroughly, and everything was packaged beyond my expectations, and all my questions were answered, and it was a very, very good experience for me. That everything was done very well, and I was very happy with it. The one thing I want to touch base on too is durability between the background and the rocks. The rocks definitely were solid. I mean, you could definitely feel just by holding on to them and putting them in the tank, like they're just solid. You're not gonna have any issues with those. The background is also very solid. It is made of very solid foam material, but whenever I get down to cleaning the tank and start brushing down anything that might be of an eyesore, I'll probably do a follow-up video of how cleaning of the Aqua Decor goes. But as far as installing them and putting everything together, and you shouldn't have any issues down the road, even with installing it and putting them in place to where you need to. The next thing I want to mention is when siliconing the background to the back of the glass, it was actually a lot easier as I anticipated, because I was kind of intimidated by it for a little bit. But then as I got a rhythm going and I started getting each piece together, it got easier and easier as I did it. And obviously this is the very first time I've done this, so it actually wasn't too bad as I expected. Because when I started putting these things together before siliconing, just to kind of get a general idea of how everything put together, I was thinking, man, this is gonna be tough. But it actually wasn't too bad, and I was pretty happy with it. So if you do one of these things, just take your time, be easy with everything, and you'll do just fine. So the next thing I'd like to bring up, if there's anything negative about it, is I did struggle with the rocks whenever putting them in the water, because the hole on the rocks were very, very small. So it just took a lot of time for those rocks to fill up with water. And once they did, it was okay because you could move around the water and place them, but it did take a while, and I wish those holes were just a little bit bigger and maybe a little bit easier to put into the water. So that was the only struggle that I had with this. So that would be the one negative thing I would say about the Aqua Decor background, and that's more specific as far as the rocks go. The background went fine, but that was just more specifically about the rocks, because that's something that you can add on to your order. It's not included with your background. So that's something to keep in mind as well when ordering. So if I were to give an overall rating of this on a scale of 1 to 10, and 10 being the best, I would give it a 9 out of 10. And with that 9 out of 10 rating, between everything, considering everything I've mentioned right now, is obviously that one thing I mentioned about the rocks, of just having that small hole. But other than that, I think everything turned out really well. And I couldn't be happier with the setup and how everything turned out. I mean, everything looks great. I'm really excited that it's finally done. And because of the 9 out of 10 rating, I actually did buy one of their slim backgrounds to put on my 55-gallon tank. So, I mean, I'm a returning customer, so I obviously like them. So it's been really neat to go through the experience and install the slim background too. And I might do a video on that as well. So with my full review and final thoughts, I hope you guys have gotten a better understanding and more clarity upon buying one of these backgrounds, and if you consider them or not. It's a very, very long process, but it was totally worth it for me, and the money and time and energy well spent, because the end result, in my opinion, everything looks really, really good. And I really think the fish have all settled in, and it's really neat to see this all come together as a whole. Thank you guys so much for watching through this series. It's been a lot of fun for me to do this for the first time, and it's been wonderful to share it all with you guys. I hope you've really enjoyed this review, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Price tag out.